When I was a kid, we only took one vacation in the summer, and it was always the same vacation. We drove straight north from St. Louis to southern Minnesota. We stopped in the one town where my one set of grandparents lived and then went to the other. The first stop was my grandparents' farm near a little town called Freeborn, Minnesota. The last time I had remembered being there was about 1986. I was 12. My aunt was graduating from high school, and so we went into the gym and visited the school. But I wasn't there again until about 27 years later. When I was a kid, there was a grocery store that had it was small. It had like 2 or 3 aisles, which I was used to supermarkets, so it was amazing to me to go see that. And it had this green screen door that would whack shut and creak as it went. And then when we went back 27 years later, as we drove through town, I wasn't really paying attention because we were there for my grandmother's burial, which was, the cemetery was kind of on the back side of town, and I was following to see where we were going. But on the way out, I could take a look around. That school that I had once visited that the graduation had taken place in was almost totally covered with trees. It had been closed, and it looked like it had been left for dead. The grocery store wasn't there anymore. The town wasn't what I remembered, though my memory was maybe a little shady. So it felt to me like this whole place had kind of been left for dead. If you think about our culture and our world, it is a culture and world that are always moving on to the next thing. Working in cycles as we seek after opportunities and seek new places and new things that we might be able to do as we seek life, really. You can find all sorts of small towns that look and maybe feel like they're left for dead as young people have gone off to cities to try to find work or to do the things that they feel called to do and love to do. And those towns can then look like they're left behind, left for dead. Even whole big cities like Detroit seem like they've been left for dead as new industries have come along and others have closed up shop. When you travel around, you see institutions like school systems and our federal government that look like they're left for dead. Because our story that we live in the world is one that is always moving. And if you just go back to the beginning of history and just kind of follow those cycles through, empires rise and they fall. New places come along. People buy houses out in the suburbs and move further out where you can get more for your money. But then the places they leave behind sometimes collapse. And you end up with these places that are just left for dead. But it's not just places. It happens in our lives as well. As you gather here this morning, you come having done whatever you do during the week. Maybe you work, maybe you're retired, maybe you go to school, or you're just on spring break. And in all of those places, we try to find balance. That's the thing that people tell us to do work-life balance and to find balance with recreation and exercise and diet. The trouble with that is, I've never found anyone who's very good at balance. In fact, I don't know that I've ever found anyone that has balanced all those things well. Which means we spend a lot of energy trying to bring balance, trying to find life, trying to find wholeness by chasing after all these little bits, but we never get there. We may spend some time focusing on diet for a while, be really good at that, but then maybe we let off exercise. Maybe we think a new job is going to be the thing that helps us, and so we can get away from all those long work hours, and then it turns out the new job has just as many hours. And as we seek after trying to spend time with family, we have to give a little bit there, and all of that balance never really comes. Which means we're seeking life, we're seeking wholeness, we're seeking wellness, and we never find it. And sooner or later we resign ourselves that something is just going to be left for dead. It might be our health. Maybe you've left joy for dead and figure that's never coming back. Maybe you've left employment for dead and don't think that you'll ever find meaningful work that is fulfilling for you as you go. Whatever it is, we all have some part of us that gets left for dead as we try to find life in this big story that just keeps cycling around, calling us to new things, calling us to new places, calling us to seek life in our own efforts, in our own ability to bring ourselves happiness. And that big broader story is one too that just sits in violence as war follows war and guns and all of that stuff that float around that we seem to think are answers to questions about life, but they really only bring us closer to death. As the women came to the tomb that morning, they weren't looking for someone who had been left for dead. They were looking for someone who was dead. They came to visit a tomb, to tend to a body. And these two dazzling figures come to them and say, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead?" They're not really. They're looking for the dead among the dead. So this question must have been bizarre to them. But why are you looking for the living among the dead? And then they unpack it for him. Don't you remember? He told you he would die but then rise. And then they start to begin to see what has happened. But what is happening is these two dazzling angels give them a different version, a different story to live by. They've been living by the story where when you die, you're dead and you're done. And now they've been given this truth that that story of having to live with death, that story of having to fix yourself, that story that just continues to roll on as the world's story, isn't the only one. And it's not the one that can bring you life. These two dazzling people come tell them that there is a different way to live. And as they go back and tell the rest of the disciples and apostles, they don't believe them. Because the story that we are all bound up in is a very powerful story. It shapes us each and every day. We hear messages about it from advertising, from ourselves, from the people that tell us to pull us up by our bootstraps. For all of that carries along with us. It is a strong and powerful story. So when they come with this word that Jesus hasn't indeed been raised, nobody believes them. Because it just sounds crazy and fantastic. As we gather on this Easter Sunday, it still is a story that a lot of people won't believe. It sounds crazy and fantastic. But I stand here today before you because I really believe it is true. That the other story does not work, that we get bound up in it, but it will not bring us life. Jesus, the raised Jesus, who makes us new, does bring us life, unbinds us from that other story, and makes us into this new creation. That's what these waters of baptism are about, washing off that old story so that we can live in this new one. I Googled Freeborn, Minnesota this week to see if the town was indeed dead. It is not. In fact, I looked at the population statistics, and the whole time it's been a town since the 1800s. The population hasn't changed all that much. It's always been a town of 200 to 300 people. It's alive and well, and I guarantee if you went there and looked for it, you would find resurrection. You would find people that don't just live in Freeborn, but people who are born free. Born free from the old story to live in the new story. And when we're born free, we live differently. We go out into the world differently. I stand here before you today not because I sat down when I was 10 years old and read the whole Bible and decided it must be true. I'm here because I've seen resurrection. I've never had a conversation with anybody who came to faith because they just reasoned through it and it made sense. Because it doesn't make sense. It's an idle tale that was told, but it is fantastic and it is true. I'm here because I've seen resurrection. I have sat with a guy my age who was a slave as a child, who was abandoned by his family, taken in by another that made him into a slave. Later, he lived on the streets. Now, he's a father. He has his own business. He invests in sharing God's love with everyone he meets, all with a huge, gentle spirit of forgiveness and mercy. That is resurrection. He's not who he used to be. He's still who he is, but now he's a new creation that has been risen from that place of death. I've seen marriages that were on the brink of failure, almost left for dead, come back to new life. Not the same as it was, but a new thing. That's resurrection. I've seen communities of people who were all bound up in tension and struggle and left for dead come to new life and be raised with new energy and fervor to go serve the world. These are resurrection stories. I've seen people in deep, dark places of addiction get yanked out of that. Not because of what they did, but because God yanked them out of that and put them in a new and healthy place. These women go back and tell the story, and Peter runs to see. When Peter is done checking into the tomb and starts to get that this might have happened, we're told in the text that he was amazed. He was amazed. What happens when you see something amazing? You gotta go tell people, don't you? When you see something that's boring, you forget about it. When you see something that's amazing, you go tell people. You want to tell them. This is what happens to those women. It's what happens to Peter, and it ought to be what happens to us as the church. Because our primary identity as the church is as witnesses of the resurrection. That's what Peter said in the reading we heard. It's what the women were. They witnessed it. They went and told. Peter saw it, went and told. Our task is to see resurrection, to experience it, which I hope we all have, and then to go tell people about it, to be amazed at it, because it is not the story we've been bound up in. It is the born free story that we live with. And if we go out into the world looking for it,
we will see it because it is all around us. Jesus is coming into the world every day, freeing people, giving people a new life, raising people up in resurrection. And when we see that, it shapes us because it's amazing. But then as we go as the hands and feet and hearts of Christ and we touch people, they may just well experience resurrection through us as we lift them up and help them along. And in that way, then, they become amazed. We become amazed. We're all amazed at this great new life we've been given. Born free to share God's love with the world so that no one is left for dead. Amen.